All right, I've got some new 49ers intel for you on the Brock Purdy situation based on what I gathered in Palm Beach at the Breakers for the NFL owners meetings. Good time for a live, flew back, now at home in the studio. And what a night of Bay Area sports. Big win for the Warriors in Memphis. And the Giants, the San Francisco Giants, they're 4-1. They win in Houston. But let's hear from Jed York. This is the clip to set the table for things. York this morning at the Breakers on the Brock Purdy contract situation.
I mean, I don't negotiate contracts, but any conversations that I've had with Brock personally have been great. So I feel good, and when he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. It shouldn't be that hard to do.
It really sounds like the 49ers want the ball in Brock Purdy's court. Let's have another listen, keeping that in mind. One more time, listening to Jed York.
I mean, I don't negotiate contracts, but any conversations that I've had with Brock personally have been great. So I feel good, and when he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. It shouldn't be that hard to do.
When he's ready, when Brock Purdy is ready, we'll sit down and finish it. Obviously, the negotiations have started. I'm sure that the 49ers have a number. I'm sure that Brock Purdy has his number, or his representation has his number. The 49ers want Purdy to come closer to their number. Obviously, Purdy is going to want to pull the 49ers up toward his. I know that guarantees are what's going to make this deal and what's going to be the meat and potatoes of the contract analysis, but to simplify things for the sake of discussion, since we're not privy to the absolute details here, we can operate by average per year. I'm sure that if we keep it that simple, the 49ers have a number right now, say that it's 49 million, 50 million, 51 million. I'm sure that they have a number that would be literally signable for Brock Purdy at this moment. But that's not to say that Brock Purdy would take that number. His number is probably much higher. I would say that his number, as we've said, we've talked about percentage of the cap. We've just calculated what he can theoretically ask for based on these other quarterback contracts. It's a fairly wide range. We've said 58 to 68 million. So if the 49ers are somewhere in the low 50s and the 49ers are somewhere in the high 50s or even more than 60 million, just based on the natural escalation of these contracts, you have the natural gulf in negotiations like this. The key is to find middle ground. Now, the clues that we can look at that we heard about from these NFL owners meetings start with the way that Jed York, Kyle Shanahan, and John Lynch have talked about this contract. And they've talked about this in very, very optimistic terms, all of them. And I was able to write about it on the San Francisco Standard essentially twice. Get this up on the screen so you guys can see it. That was Jed York in his interview. There's the article up on the Standard. Lynch especially was the most confident that I've heard him when he speaks of a contract. I mean, normally he's reserved, but optimistic. He was downright confident that this is going to get done. Kyle Shanahan seemed downright confident, even though he's very tired early this morning, that it was going to get done. And here you hear Jed York not only thinking that it's going to get done, but also saying, Brock just needs to come to the table and it will get done. So the 49ers, from York's perspective, you can tell they definitely want the ball in Brock Purdy's court, but a holdup, and it could be a very fair holdup, is that Brock Purdy may want to pass it right back. Some negotiation back and forth may still need to happen. The question is, how big exactly is the gap, and what will the number, if we're going to simplify this to APY, what will the happy zone be? What number will both sides agree to? I can say that it is in the 49ers' greatest interest to float around a number that is comically low for Brock Purdy. And it's in Brock Purdy's best interest and his agents and his camp's best interest to float around a number that is comically high for the 49ers. So the media, often you're going to hear extremes in the media. And I don't know if they're related to leaks coming out of this or not. Sometimes we hear just crazy numbers that people take as fact and put out there, like the $45 million number. Sometimes you'll hear a $49 million number. Occasionally you'll hear 50, right? People are just tossing numbers around. But at the end of the day, in a negotiation, both sides want the norm to be the accepted norm, right? The publicly accepted norm, which would be, oh, Brock Purdy's worth $52 million a year, or Brock Purdy's worth $59 million a year. Both sides want their version to be the norm in the public thought. So say that the 49ers obviously want the best deal possible for Brock Purdy. They're going to want a lower number to be the publicly accepted one to help steer the conversation in their direction. So they're happy with any number that's a little bit lower floating out there. Brock Purdy's camp, meanwhile, they're going to be happy with any number that's a little bit higher floating out there. This is where we have to sift through the noise, because each side is obviously going to be putting greater weight on its extreme. And the 49ers extreme is going to be on the low end. Brock Purdy's extreme is going to be on the higher end. The question is, where is that middle ground, and how close are they actually in terms of finding middle ground? Because the extremes that we hear probably won't be all that close. I think the extremes that we'll hear will probably be somewhere between $49 million and $58 million. That's a huge gap, right? That is a $19 million gap in APY. There's no way they're actually that far apart if John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and Jed York are so optimistic in all their talks about this deal. If they were $19 million apart right now, if the 49ers were offering only 49 and Brock Purdy wanted $58 million, well, then the 49ers would probably be making other contingency plans. They'd be like, well, we're not going to be able to close this kind of gap. So I think that the delta here is obviously much smaller. And I'm speaking from what I learned at the owners' meetings, right? So you guys have to bear with me here. There's not going to be hard and fast, firm audio recordings of any negotiation, but you learn things as you go through these processes. You learn things based on the 49ers' history. You learn things based on studying how the market works, and you learn things by talking to people. And I think that, after our conversations with Lynch, with Shanahan, and with Jed York, and just being in Miami or being in the Miami area, I know that people from Palm Beach say that's far from Miami. Well, quick little segue here. My Lyft driver coming from the Palm Beach airport to the hotel a couple nights ago, he said, you're from California? All right, I'll describe this to you. Palm Beach is like San Diego is to LA. And I couldn't agree more. It is just a much, much more manageable version of the Miami area. San Diego to LA, Palm Beach to Miami. I'll take that comparison anytime. I guess that comparison would mean that Fort Lauderdale is Orange County. I think it works. Miami is the East Coast to LA, two cities that are very similar in terms of layout and the beach and the glamour. But anyway, based on the conversations there in Palm Beach, based on the interviews, based on everything that we've gathered, I think that the delta is small. I don't think it's something between 50 million and 68 million. I think that the delta is probably around that 55 to 60 million mark. I think it's probably only about $5 million big right now. And how quickly that gulf is bridged will probably determine on the next couple pushes of deadline pressure. And there seems to be some optimism, and this is especially from John Lynch, that the next push of deadline pressure, which would be the start of the offseason program in the middle of this month, it's April 1st right now, so we'd be moving forward to around, I think it's going to be around April 15th or so. The start of the offseason program may be what causes some movement, and that could be from both sides, right? Both sides could compromise in a situation like that, and both move closer toward that happy meeting spot. So if one side's at 60 and one side's at 55 million, and both sides really want this to be resolved by the start of the offseason program, it's completely possible that Brock Purdy budges 2.5 million and the 49ers budge 2.5 million, and you can meet at 57.5 million. Now, I know that I am oversimplifying, and I was the first to be warning people about average per year and saying that is just a very rudimentary metric. But I think sometimes, for the sake of illustrating how these negotiations work, because it is important, the surface level numbers are important. There is a vanity component to this for both players as agents and negotiators from teams. But there's going to be a whole lot more to the structure that we can unpack and analyze after the deal is signed. But everything is moving in a very good direction from the 49ers standpoint. I think from Brock Purdy's standpoint too, I've gathered only good vibes in that regard. And I think that the delta is not big at this point. And we'll see if that next wave of deadline pressure, which is the start of the 49ers offseason program, brings Purdy and the 49ers even closer, resolves this once and for all, or if it's going to take the actual OTA wave of deadline pressure. The offseason program begins in mid-April. OTAs about a month after that. OTAs, that organized team activities, the 49ers are actually going to take the field there. We're going to see some 11-on-11 football, although pads won't be on. But it's been a point of emphasis for San Francisco to attack this offseason. Kyle Shanahan spoke today, and one thing that he emphasized was that in years past, when the 49ers had played 20 games per season, they had reached the offseason and were just trying to heal up and just make it through. Like, they were resting basically through some of these OTAs and some of the early team activities, right, in April. This year, because the season ended on that bad 6-11 note, because they were done sooner rather than later, there is a feeling of the 49ers really being eager to attack the offseason. And I think the most important player, the most important symbol on this 49ers team, I mean, when you pay a quarterback, you look for that quarterback to lead the way, is Brock Purdy. And that way, it's more important for him to be there throughout the offseason program than it was for somebody like Brandon Ayuk to be at the offseason program. Ayuk's not the quarterback of this team. This is the most important position. So that creates a sense of urgency, I think, for both sides when some of these deadlines come up, such as the start of the offseason program, such as OTAs. And obviously the holy grail deadline is the beginning of training camp, because once you get a holdout or a hold in moving into training camp, things get a lot more difficult. This is why quarterbacks have such leverage, by the way, because if a QB says, I'm not going to show up, well, what's the team going to do? The 49ers still have designs on winning this year. They want to load up with a nice draft class. They still have a core of many Hall of Fame players. That was something that they emphasized this week in Palm Beach. They're not going to want to waste that year. They're trying to find the right mix of veteran muscle, veteran pedigree with youthful hunger, youthful speed, youthful health. But all of that is completely irrelevant if the quarterback is not in place. So the one biggest piece of this offseason is to finalize this deal with Brock Purdy. They have financially readied themselves for this. It's all up on the San Francisco Standard. I wrote all about it. Look at the headline there. Brock Purdy's contract is the pivot point of all the 49ers offseason moves. This show is brought to you by Mando. Mando, they sent me some of their product, and it's the real deal. Does that 3-in-1 shampoo leave you needing a second shower just a few hours after the first? From the founders of Lumi, Mando Whole Body Deodorant is helping men conquer their odor in a new way. Formulated with mandelic acid, Mando has long-lasting 72-hour odor control that actually stops odor before it starts. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use the code Lombardi at shopmando.com. That is SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Thanks to them, we're going to have another cool thing that we promote here. They're sending me another package of it. It's called Psalm Sleep. I've slept really well, but that's not until I actually get it in the mail. It's been a game changer, especially, man, with some of this travel, you're going back and forth, time zone changes and everything. It starts to wear on you a bit. Thankfully, only had to go from Eastern time zone to Central time zone after these NFL owners meetings, where there were a few rules updates at these owners meetings. The NFL's kickoff rule has been made permanent with some adjustments. The dynamic kickoff rule, the touchback spot has moved from the 30-yard line to the 35-yard line to encourage more returns. Talked to Richard Hightower, the former 49ers special teams coordinator, doing a good job with the Chicago Bears. They had the number 5 special teams unit in all of football. He was in on a lot of these special teams meetings regarding the dynamic kickoff. He also was in on a lot of the meetings last year as the rule was being implemented. The brainchild of Sam Schwartzstein, the center for Andrew Luck at Stanford football. Sam lives in the Bay Area now. So congratulations to him. His dynamic kickoff rule has been made permanent. Regular season overtime rules will now align more closely with postseason rules, and that both teams are guaranteed an opportunity to possess the ball in overtime, regardless of whether the first team scores a touchdown. So, I mean, it used to be different, right, with the regular season and the postseason. It still is a little bit different because regular season overtime remains only 10 minutes long. In the postseason, it's 15 minutes long. But aside from the clock, the way that the procedure moves is going to be uniform between the regular season and the postseason. There also is extended replay assist. Instant replay capabilities have been expanded to allow officials to review specific objective aspects of a play when clear and obvious video evidence is available. They tried that this past season. I think that it worked fairly well. So that has been issued an extension for this 2025 season. They shelved or tabled, I guess tabled is better. Shelved means you're putting it away, but they've tabled the tush push ban. So that might be determined in the summer when the NFL has another meeting before the start of this year. Last year, remember, the third quarterback rule was tabled, but then it was ultimately, what was it, approved? Forgot what happened in the summer. But some of these rules, they aren't decided at the actual NFL spring meeting. And they could table them for later, and then they reach their conclusion at that later date. So those are the new rules that were introduced in Palm Beach. We're going to go through some more of this 49ers intel. This is some stuff that I have not been able to share yet. I asked Kyle Shanahan today how Mitch Wishnowsky is doing with his back injury. Remember, Mitch missed, half the season last year? It was a disastrous year for the 49ers special teams unit with the back issue. And Mitch Wishnowsky is also on the wrong side of 30. He's not necessarily the youngest player, especially considering the fact that the 49ers added him in 2019 as a draft pick. Comes from Australia, played his college football at Utah. Older player, back issue. You're a little bit concerned. Kyle Shanahan said that he's doing really good, quote, doing really good right now. So the 49ers hope to have Mitch Wishnowsky back as their punter. Brant Boyer, their new special teams coordinator, went out and got a new long snapper. So they've replaced Tabor Pepper with John Weeks. Special teams seems to have a busy offseason for the 49ers for obvious reasons because they were terrible last year. The kicker, Jake Moody, is going to have competition. I think that a good guy to bring in would be Nick Folk, who was 38 and 39 years old over the past 2 seasons, turned 40 during the course of the 2024 season, but he's only missed 1 field goal over those 2 years. like in each of those 2 years. So 2 field goals total missed for Nick Folk. His 2 most accurate seasons. Now, the question is, will he be willing to sign on to the 49ers where he'd face a kicking competition? Maybe at an older age, he wouldn't be interested in that, or maybe at an older age, he'd want to stay sharp over the course of the offseason. I don't know. I can't see into Nick Folk's thought process, but he's been the most successful kicker that is currently on the market over the past 2 years. Only 2 missed kicks over those 2 years. And the 49ers want to bring in credible competition for Jake Moody. You don't want a situation where it's just some scrub that, might have had a hot streak once in his NFL career or in college, but isn't going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Moody over the course of the offseason, because then you've solved nothing. Jake Moody's actually been a decent practice kicker for the 49ers, and he's had really good stretches within games for San Francisco. He went 14 of 15 before the high ankle sprain. You need something to actually put the pressure on him, not just through practice, but through the preseason games before you have to cut down that 53-man roster. And if Moody can prevail through that pressure, the 49ers believe that he'll be ready for the regular season. He'll be back to the 14 of 15 version before the high ankle sprain. So whatever the 49ers decide to do here, and it's likely going to be a veteran, and maybe they'll try to get Nick Folk. Maybe it'll be somebody else. I think Matt Prater's out there as well. He's a veteran who's notched a lot of kicks in his career. I mean, the former Bronco. This is there are some names out there that could, with their expertise, potentially give Jake Moody, who obviously was shaky, very shaky to close last season, some trouble. But whatever you do as the 49ers, you want to make sure that it is a functional decision. So even if Jake Moody wins the competition, you need to make sure that you put him through enough pressure to where he shakes out of whatever was bothering him down the stretch run after that high ankle sprain. I think that Brant Boyer decided that they needed an upgrade at long snapper. I think it's fair to say that might help Jake Moody. They've moved from Tabor Pepper to John Weeks, and Weeks is 39. To be able to stick around the NFL as long as he has, 13 or 14 seasons, you have to be doing something right. So I definitely look out for this kicking signee that we're going to see probably after the NFL draft. That's something that Kyle Shanahan confirmed would happen today. Talked to Shanahan this morning, and I mean, so much came up over the course of this conversation. The run defense is something that is not talked about enough, how bad it was for the 49ers last year. I feel that people love to complain about everything that the 49ers do, except for the stuff that's actually wrong with this team. I think that's why you guys watch here, because we actually keep it real. We actually don't just whine and cry about stuff that's just basic math, right? We're not sitting here calling the 49ers cheap for spending the most money in the NFL, which may actually end up being the case after this season. We actually stick with facts. We're rooted in objectivity. But what we do is call out the 49ers when they have the number 29 run defense in the NFL. So in Palm Beach to begin this week, I straight up asked both John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, how high up the priority list is this run defense? Because I know that if the 49ers don't improve massively in terms of run defense, their season is going to be dead before it even starts. If you cannot stop the run at a level above number 20, it doesn't matter how good your offense is. It doesn't matter how good your pass defense is. It doesn't matter how good your special teams is. You can be an all-world team, but you're not going to win a Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen because you're not going to be able to control a game. Like, it is a fundamental pillar of football. Just like we say the 49ers have fundamental pillars on their roster as players, it is a fundamental pillar of the sport to be able to at least slow the run to give your team a chance. Otherwise, you are just going to get worked up and down the field. Ask the 2019 Green Bay Packers. Anyway, it was very interesting to me that both John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan thought that Robert Salah would be a significant driver of change for the run defense. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that the 49ers are definitely unified in their thoughts on Robert Salah, their returning defensive coordinator. And, it turned into a little bit of a conversation today because then I went back with this to Kyle Shanahan. I said, when he said what he did about Robert Salah, I immediately remembered 2017 and 2018, the first 2 years of this Shanahan tenure. They didn't have a great defense back then. They didn't have a great team back then. They didn't have the roster to really scare you back then. But one thing they did decently well, especially in 2017 when they were really thin, was defend the run. And I said, they were beaten up in 2017 too. I mean, I remember injuries galore. It was even worse than it was in 2024, and they were at a worse starting point, but they still were able to decently contain the run. So to me, that means point credit at Robert Salah, point credit at the schematics. Now let's listen into what Kyle Shanahan said, or I'll read what Kyle Shanahan said. He said, our run defense was bad, especially the way it went losing some of those D linemen. Losing Hargrave hurt us a lot more than people realize. Not having Dre throughout the whole year hurt us. The linebacker that replaced him hurt us. There, Kyle is throwing some shade at Devondre Campbell. The linebacker that replaced Dre Greenlaw hurt us. That's something that we knew we were thin at going into the year, run defense. Then we had a couple injuries that made it harder to hold on. That's why we feel like we're somewhat starting over with it. So Kyle Shanahan literally in response to my question said the 49ers feel like they're somewhat starting over with their run defense. Hey, right? If you actually listen to what Kyle Shanahan is saying, I know he talks fast sometimes, he mumbles sometimes, but if you zoom in on what he's saying, you will understand the 49ers offseason move. So people are like, why'd they get rid of Malik Collins? Why'd they get rid of Leonard Floyd? Well, listen to Kyle Shanahan. He says, we feel like we're somewhat starting over with our run defense. That's a huge statement to make in the NFL. But he, in the same answer, says the run defense was bad last year. If it's that bad last year and it's that unacceptable, that's why you want to just crumple this up and throw it in the trash. And that's essentially what the 49ers have done. They're keeping the two core pillars from the front seven, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. They weren't part of the run defense problems last year. Those are 2+ players. Those are 2 game changers. You obviously want to construct around those pillars. But at other problem spots, the 49ers have said, we need to get younger. We need to get faster. We need to get healthier. We need to get cheaper so that we have the cost structure in place to healthily build this team out moving forward. So at the other spots, the 49ers have gotten leaner and meaner and ready for an NFL draft where they're going to bring in a lot of defensive linemen. I think it's going to be very D-line heavy based on what I've gathered in Florida. So here we have, in just through performance, everybody here is obsessing over money, and people don't even understand the salary cap, and they're obsessing over money, and they're not spending enough here. They're not spending enough here. This is a performance league. And oftentimes you can get a player who outperforms a more expensive one because you can acquire talent through the cost-controlled NFL draft. So the first place that you should look whenever a team is executing moves that may confuse you, that may, be tough to understand at first, the first place you should look is performance. If the 49ers were letting go of a bunch of players, if they're renovating their defense, and your first question is why, well, look at where the defense didn't perform last year. They didn't perform in the run game. And Kyle Shanahan is telling us right here when he says, quote, we feel like we're somewhat starting over with our run defense. They want to start over because they were bad last season. So that's the good starting point. You have a guy like Nick. You have a guy like Fred. You still have some really good players in there, but we have to hit on some draft picks. We have to hit on some youth. We've got to change it up a little bit. I mean, coaches generally are not this open. So whenever a coach says we got to change something up a little bit, or whenever a coach says we're somewhat starting over with it, that means they're blowing the whole thing up and they are fundamentally changing some things because they were fundamentally bad last season. They were out of their gaps. They tried to schematically change some things to make up for injuries. They weren't able to do it. They're going back to what worked at the start with Robert Salah. They have to rebuild the foundation of this defense because it slipped way too much last year. Anyone not making the run defense the number one story right now as far as what the 49ers need to improve, does not really have a firm grasp of how the 49ers can get better after the 6-11 year. You can focus on trivial stuff or you can focus on real stuff, and the run defense is definitely in the category of real stuff. Let's hear more from Shanahan here. If you have good players and a good scheme, you should be good against the run. When you lose players or someone's getting after your scheme, how do you adjust? The experience that Robert Saleh's had, he's had to do that over the years. Last year, when we were banged up and knew we had to do some different things, when we did do different things, it was hit or miss. That's an indictment of the inexperienced staff last year, led by Nick Sorensen. You get a few guys out of a gap, it works a little bit, but you're being more risky than usual, and now they're breaking a 60-yarder, and your run stats are completely messed up. So that's stuff that Robert has gone through a bunch. He's done it in New York. He's done it here. You always want to be able to fix it with personnel, but when you can't fix it with personnel right away, you've got to do it with scheme, and Robert's been successful doing that with both. One of the biggest, if not the biggest additions of this 49ers offseason, and I think it's going to only loom larger as time goes along because they're going to add a lot of rookies to this defense. They're running that Rams model, is Robert Salah. He built this from the ground up in 2017. He's going to have to build a version of the 49ers are essentially starting over with in 2024. Now they're starting over with a head start. They've got Bosa, they've got Warner. In 2017, Salah didn't have Bosa and Warner. They've got Deommodore Lenoir. They didn't have that guy either. They have Malik Mustafa. Those are the core pieces. Now you got to build up around that. Can Jair Brown turn into a core piece? Can D. Winters turn into a core piece? Can Renardo Green turn into a core piece? How about a cornerback like Trey Brown? What can he show to potentially win that cornerback 3 spot? Those are all crucial spots on this 49ers defense that need to be filled. There are a lot of questions, but that's why Kyle Shanahan said that the defense this year especially should see more competition than perhaps at any point of his 49ers tenure, because you've got that mix of really established veterans, but you also have a lot of spots up for grabs. It does seem like this is going to be a very, very cutthroat offseason for the 49ers on the practice field. I, for one, am really, really looking forward to covering it. It should be a lot. It should be very, very intriguing to watch as we go through, because between some of what we talk about with the defensive competition, and then on the offensive side of the ball where things are more established, but still a little bit unsettled because of A, the Brandon Ayuk injury, and B, some of the changes that the 49ers are going to be making. Luke Farrell at it. They got a tight end too again. And obviously running back, how's that entire rotation going to work for San Francisco? No more Jordan Mason. You got McCaffrey and Garendo up top of that running back room. Between all those things, I think both sides of the ball are set up for this evolution that we're going to get to watch in real time over the course of practice, and then obviously moving from practice into the preseason and finally the regular season. Schedule comes out in about a month? We know the teams the 49ers are going to play, but we don't know exactly when those games will be. Moving on with Kyle Shanahan. He had so much to say today. It was cool. We've talked about Moody. We talked about Mitch. D. Winters, this is a good one. D. Winters, and this really matches our theory regarding Shanahan. D has been working on his body so he can play the way he does and stay healthy through a 17-game season. That is what Shanahan said about the 49ers. Linebacker 2 as of right now, but I think he still needs to secure that job via competition. D can cover. D can hit. I think that the issue, just talking to people for a couple of years now about D. Winters, has been the frame. Dre Greenlaw was special, but Dre Greenlaw was not immune to getting beaten up out on that football field because he flew around, hit people. He was an enforcer. I get it. He moved fast. He can cover. But the faster you move, the more painful those collisions can be. And Dre Greenlaw, I mean, this guy collided with players, right? And he's going to collide with players in Denver. We'll see how much longer he's able to last in the league. It was tough for him last year with only those 35 snaps. D. Winters, at a younger age, is facing a similar question. We know that he can cover. We know he can be a violent player. We know he could fly around the football field. But how sustainable can he make that? Dre Greenlaw missed quite a few games over the course of his time with the 49ers. That was the one big drawback. That's what prevented the 49ers from going and, just saying, okay, we're going to outbid they actually did outbid the Broncos, but it prevented them from going and outbidding them by 20 or 30% or securing Dre Greenlaw before he hit free agency. The availability wasn't quite there, and availability is something that the 49ers are focusing greatly on over the course of this offseason as they remodel this roster. So if D. Winters is going to answer the question that Dre Greenlaw wasn't able to answer, he's going to have to get his body ready. He's going to have to show some durability. And the 49ers, to be honest, I mean, they're not going to know this until probably midway through the 3/4 of the way through next season. They're going to have to see how Dre Greenlaw or how D. Winters holds up. And will it be better than how Dre Greenlaw was able to hold up toward the end of his time with San Francisco? And that's why they have other competition at the position. I mean, we can take a look at it. There are several names, and they've added a couple depth pieces over the course of free agency that could fight for some playing time. We know that Luke Gifford played for the Tennessee Titans last year, intercepted Joe Burrow, but I've got a hole at the linebacker position. That's the red signification here. We've got the yellow pillar and Fred Warner. Tatum Bethune is somebody who Kyle Shanahan said impressed the 49ers last year, first-year player out of Florida State, because he learned how to play the Mike linebacker position first. So he learned the communication radio in his helmet. And with that, he now is able to command both the weak side and the Sam position, the strong side linebacker spots. So look out for Tatum Bethune. They're hoping that he takes a second-year jump. I think Jalen Graham might be underneath Tatum Bethune on the pecking order by the time that this season gets rolling. Curtis Robinson, he's recovering from the ACL, so you can't really expect anything imminent. And it is notable that they brought Deshaun White back. He was on the practice squad last year, so maybe he has a chance to make a second-year jump. But I think that the draft might yield more talent that could immediately thrust itself into this conversation. Although I will say it was awfully interesting to hear Sean Payton the other day say that linebacker is one of those positions where it's a lot tougher for a rookie to make an immediate impact. And I know Sean Payton is running a different defense than the 49ers, but he did just invite Dre Greenlaw into his defense. He did just invite Talanoa Hufanga into his defense. In fact, the entire middle of Denver's defense is built up of ex-49ers with DJ Jones, Hufanga, and Dre Greenlaw. So there are enough similarities there to make you wonder, do the 49ers really want a rookie playing at linebacker? And if that's not the case, if they don't want a rookie playing at linebacker, well, then D. Winters has the leg up, but he's going to have to show that durability. Tatum Bethune, as a second-year guy who's already learned the Mike position, is going to have to show that he's taking the next step. I thought that Shanahan's talk about the body and the durability, though, of D. Winters today was really interesting because it did line up with a lot of what we had been theorizing over time. Then there's the offensive line question. Brendel at the center position. I've been telling you guys for weeks now, right? I think for about a month we've been talking about it. People are never happy when I say it. I said, the 49ers like Brendel more than you do. I don't know if I agree with the 49ers stance here. I think my stance is that Brendel regressed in 2024. I think the pass protection metrics, which were really good his first year starting in 2022, I think the slippage there really illustrates that. I think that the 49ers did not do Brendel any favors in consecutive seasons. First, on the right side, where right guard wasn't good, and that's the area that center had to help out a lot, and that wasn't solid. It got a lot better in 2024 with Dominic Pooney, but I thought that Aaron Banks regressed at left guard in 2024. So Brendel is at the pivot point of all these spots, and he's having to and he's also dealing with a offense that can't separate. An offensive line always looks a little bit worse if the receivers aren't separating because they've got to block for a little bit longer. But he's also dealing with that and a knee tendonitis, which obviously slowed him throughout the course of the offseason program. I'm of the opinion that Brendel's best football was played in 2022 and maybe through the first part of 2023. but it definitely wasn't played in 2024, and he's 32 years old. And at the very least, I think the 49ers need to start making contingency plans for the future. But then you have Kyle Shanahan go out today and say that he thought that Brendel played at a high level. He complimented his pass protection most specifically. And then he said that Matt Hennessy is not really even going to be competing with Jake Brendel, which surprised me a little bit. I mean, you would think that you would want some competition there. Maybe Drake Nugent will come out of nowhere, the undrafted free agent out of Michigan, who was, an excellent center, undersized center in college for Jim Harbaugh, who was at the owners' meetings. Maybe it's Nugent's year to take a step forward and really knock on the door of some playing time. But it really does sound like the 49ers believe that Jake Brendel will be their best option at that center position. And if that's the case, they better still get better at the other positions, because left tackle last year without Trent Williams was a really tough spot. It made everybody worse. I thought left guard wasn't particularly good with Aaron Banks, and he signed for $19.2 million with the Packers. Maybe Ben Barch can give an upgrade there. Maybe Dominic Pooney can take a second-year jump at right guard, and maybe that helps Brendel, who's a little further removed from the knee issues that gave him some trouble last year. We do know that linemen around the league are tough to come by, and that's why it's so hard to evaluate these offensive lines just from a fan's bias perspective, because I would say that 29 or 30 other teams are upset with their offensive lines as well. One thing that John Lynch said is that he doesn't subscribe to the social media narrative. It makes sense when you look at the 49ers offensive line metrics as a whole. It was right in the middle of the pack. But I think if you're the 49, and they weren't terrible, right? And people will act like they were number 29 or number 30 when it was right there in the middle in pass blocking efficiency and run block grade. But I think that the 49ers should shoot higher than that. I think that you should be striving to have a top 10 line at least in any given season. The last time that they had that type of offensive line was 2021, before Mike McGlinchey got hurt, before Tom Compton replaced Mike McGlinchey. And, 2021 had Alex Mack at the center position. 2021 had obviously Trent Williams coming off of the new contract. It had Laken Tomlinson still playing left guard very durably for San Francisco. Top 10 pass protection that year. They didn't have the running back situation figured out, so unfortunately that hindered them. But if they can get the line back to what it was in 2021, and then in 2022 when Brendel was playing well in his first year as the starter after Alex Mack retired, the 49ers can just get it up to that level. I think that it would help Brock Purdy immensely. Relatively speaking, though, there were some steps up that they took from 2022 or 2023 to 2024, and I think those should absolutely be emphasized. More from Kyle Shanahan. Going through the whole list here. The two visits that we know about so far for the 49ers are Jalen Conyers and Harold Fannin Jr. So hear me out here. Two tight ends, 30 visits ahead of this 2025 NFL draft. There are obviously going to be 28 other visits. We'll get those documented as time rolls along. But Jalen Conyers and Harold Fannin Jr. are both receiving tight ends who I think can help pick up some of the slack for Deebo Samuel. I made videos about both of these guys last week. Now, the reason I bring it up right now is that I think it was Matt Barrows this morning asked Kyle Shanahan, hey, because you signed Luke Farrell, does that take you out of the draft market for a tight end? And Kyle Shanahan said no. And a lot of people are wondering why. Well, first off, Luke Farrell's a blocking tight end. The 49ers could still use a move receiving tight end. They call it a move tight end. And they could still pick up some of the slack, some of the specialty weapon slack that Deebo Samuel will have left behind once this 2025 season starts. You don't have to replace Deebo Samuel by getting a Deebo Samuel clone. You can work your offense into a different mold. You can evolve the offense. In fact, this is something you probably want to do to tailor it around Brock Purdy, because if every 49ers financial move this offseason is built around the pivot point of Brock Purdy, then I think that it's fair to say that their schematic moves this offseason and moving forward should be built around Brock Purdy. And if 12 personnel, which he ran more of at Iowa State than he has with the 49ers, if 12 personnel is something that you can utilize to maximize what you get from Brock Purdy, I think the 49ers should absolutely go for it. If they find a tight end that they like, if Fannin is somebody that they like, if Jalen Conyers is somebody that they like as a weapon coming from a tight end spot that could deliver similar, mismatch type of production as Deebo Samuel, but in a different way, right? Deebo brought it because he was a bulldozer. He was able to run at 4.4, despite the fact that he was a stocky player, 220, 230 pounds. But if you can bring it with somebody who has a faster 3-cone time, but maybe a slower 40 time, I know Jalen Conyers is going to be heavier than Deebo Samuel ever was, maybe 250, 260, I think maybe up to 270 at some point. If you think that you could bring an impact player in through one of those draft picks at that tight end position, you do it and you pick up the slack in a different way. So I would not rule out the 49ers picking a tight end in this draft based on all the information that I have gathered. So many notes. We're going to have like weeks worth of video content to get through some of this stuff. Mac Jones, Kyle loves the way that he plays the position. I always thought that was funny because Kyle Shanahan always used that, and Adam Peters always used that as a compliment for their man, Brock Purdy. We love the way that he plays the position. Shanahan pointed this out today, and I think that this is a good summary of everything that the 49ers are doing. The 49ers have been a top 5 spending team in football over the past 5 years. That's well documented. But Shanahan, he doesn't normally add the financial facts, but he definitely adding the financial facts now. Shanahan pointed out that out of the top 10 spending leagues, out of the top 10 spending teams in the league over the past 5 years, only the 49ers, one out of those 10 teams, have not yet given out a big money quarterback deal. Only one. So the 49ers are the only team in this upper stratosphere of spending that is just now turning to paying its quarterback. And that is significant stuff because it shows you why the 49ers have to reset, have to rearrange the deck chairs here. The 2025 reset is simple math to match that changing reality. And that's what I wrote about up on the San Francisco Standard. You should check it out. The article is available on the description of this episode. I have it somewhere here too. I could pop it open on the screen. It was Jed York greeting Brock Purdy as Purdy made his way into the locker room after one of the many 49ers wins the 49ers have notched with Purdy. Anyway, more 49ers intel from Palm Beach.
49ers intel time here from the owners' meetings. Beautiful Palm Beach, giving me Tahiti vibes, except this time we got to be a little bit more business-like about it with the Blazer. The Breakers, the site of John Lynch's press conference yesterday, Kyle Shanahan's this morning, and then Jed York's right after that. Got a lot of insight into the 49ers financial strategy, and it's stuff that we predicted, yes, but now it is firm, it is out there, it is on the record. The 49ers financial reset of this team is happening because they believe so much in Brock Purdy. He is the centerpiece for the 49ers moving forward because quarterback has to be the centerpiece. In fact, Jed York spoke today talking about how back in the Mike Nolan and the Mike Singletary eras, the 49ers had a great team defense-wise, but they didn't have a great quarterback. And because they didn't have a great quarterback, none of the good stuff on the defensive side of the ball mattered for San Francisco. If you don't have the QB locked in for the long term, you are not going to have good chances of stable success over the long run. So making sure that Brock Purdy and this contract is finalized is the quickest, most certain way for the 49ers to ensure perennial contention in the NFL. Now, based on what I gathered this week from the from this event, from the NFL owners meetings, the 49ers and Brock Purdy are getting closer and closer. In fact, there's even optimism that a deal can be finalized within the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't bet on that. I'm just saying that it seems that the vibes are very good coming out of this. I think that Jed York wants to get this done. I think that Brock Purdy's side wants to get this done. I think that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have wanted this done for a long time, and it would greatly benefit the 49ers to have everything in place heading into this 2025 season. Why don't we have a listen into Jed York talking about the 49ers' financial structure, their strategy as it relates to the quarterback centerpiece, Brock Purdy.
Well, we make that distinction, say, you're being cheap. You should be. You should
call worse.
I guess I know you kind of answered.
I think you guys have called me worse. At least a couple of you.
But how do you respond to that? Who people say, well, hey,
Look, I get it. Like, fans care, right? Like, you want to win, and when you're in a world where everybody is watching the NFL the first week of free agency, or at least the first 3 days of free agency, it's a frenzy, right? Like, you see a huge spike in social following and things like that because it's something to get engaged in. And when you're not overly active in that space, like, it's easy to say, you don't want to win. I think we have, a handful of Pro Bowlers and potentially even better players on our roster still. Like, we still have a pretty good roster. And you don't just have to do things the first 3 days in free agency, right? Like, you look at this Philadelphia Eagles last year. You go out and get a guy like Saquon Barkley, who's a future Hall of Famer, great player. Like, that's somebody that made a huge impact. I don't know that as we looked at the board that there was somebody that we felt made that type of an impact more so than making the decision to try to go pay Brock. And again, like, it's a decision that we made, I can't tell you exactly when, but midway through the season of we want to make sure that Brock is here for a long time. And again, like, you can't pay somebody quarterback money and have all of the other talent around the way we had. Now you have to start filling that piece with the draft. And that's the nice thing about having a lot of draft picks and having higher draft picks. We have the ability to continue to supplement our team by having somebody at the most important position there for a long time.
So that was Jed York this morning. A little bit before that, and maybe a little too early because we had the big party here at the Breakers last night, Kyle Shanahan had to attend the NFC Coaches Breakfast, an annual tradition, and unfortunately, NFC coaches always have to go on Tuesday morning, which is after the big NFL party on Monday night. I think it'd be a little bit more fair if they rotated on a year-to-year basis, if maybe you had AFC go Tuesday morning after the party one of these years, but unfortunately, the NFL, at least in this regard, does not care about fairness. So Kyle was a little bit tired, but Kyle did make it out to the NFC Coaches Breakfast, and this is what he had to say about San Francisco's construction this offseason.
The Rams went through a similar reset maybe 2 years ago and have done well with it. I mean, is that a guide for you guys to be able to reset the financial part of it while bringing in young, especially defensive players?
I mean, that's a perfect example recently. I think Buffalo's similar to going through it. I think when we got here, we really tried to build this through the draft. And then we did most of our finances on re-signing our own players. And when you look at our breakout year at 19, I mean, I think that was the second year of a third-round pick in Fred Warner. It was the third year of a fifth-round pick in George Kittle. It was the first year of a fifth-round pick in Greenlaw. And we had, I think it was the third year of a sixth-round pick in DJ Jones. We had a lot of draft guys that we were able to work with and build and to have a lot of success. And to have success again with those players for the next 5 years means you retain most of them. And now you're sitting there and you can't keep doing that forever. And the cool thing now is we still have been able to retain some of those guys. So it's not like we cleaned everybody out. We still got a bunch of guys around here who are big-time players, who have done a lot in the past and can still continue to do a lot here in the future.
So Shanahan today went for 32 minutes and he delved into a lot regarding the 49ers' activities in free agency and their plans as a football team in 2025. First, he addressed Luke Farrell, the 49ers signing at that tight end position, and it was cool to see him verify a lot of what we had speculated. But again, now it's on the record. So Farrell, really good run blocking tight end, and the 49ers had been missing that for the 2024 season. Remember that Charlie Werner was a great run blocker, even though he didn't catch a lot of passes for San Francisco in 2023 and in the 3 seasons before that. So Farrell has been signed to reprise that role for the 49ers, but Shanahan also added that he doesn't want George Kittle in pass protection as much. And Farrell's a good pass protector, so if you can allow George Kittle to get out and run more routes, the offense becomes more dynamic. So all of those reasons stated for the addition of Luke Farrell. And I'll go back to this. The 49ers in 2024 were the number 20 first down run efficiency team. They were number 31, that is second to last, in third and fourth down success rate when they ran the ball with less than 2 yards to go. So when they ran the ball and the opponents knew that it was likely coming, they didn't succeed. And Shanahan said one of the biggest problems was the lack of Charlie Werner. Eric Saubert did some nice things for the 49ers last year, but they needed an upgrade there, and that is Luke Farrell. Mac Jones, that's another name that's on everybody's mind. Now, Farrell played for Jacksonville last year. Mac Jones is from Jacksonville, which is not too far from where we're at the Breakers. And I have to say, the Breakers here in Palm Beach is absolutely awesome. We can pause this show, the football talk of it, to discuss a little bit of the food that we had here. They've got a seafood bar, which actually has a little fish tank built into the bar. So fish tacos with little clownfish right behind the tacos. Like, this is a real shot. I'm not kidding. And there were some of the best tacos I've ever had. Although, I've never had a more expensive sandwich. The $49 seafood club sandwich, I guess it's apt that it was $49 as we're covering the 49ers here in Palm Beach. And then, during the party that we're talking about with Kyle Shanahan and all these characters, it's the best party of the year, at least as far as the NFL is concerned. During the party, we saw this group of hermit crabs. Supposedly, a group of hermit crabs is called a cast of hermit crabs. And as you can see, in this cast of hermit crabs, there are football helmets. And the one wearing the 49ers helmet is just absolutely dominating, going over the top of the one wearing the Giants helmet. The 49ers happen to play the New York Giants this year, so I think that's a prediction for one of the games this season. We'll be headed to the Meadowlands, that game technically in New Jersey, because remember, the only team in New York is the Buffalo Bills. But 49ers Giants, the hermit crabs predict that one. 49ers are going to waltz all over the Giants. Anyway, back to Mac Jones. Somehow we went from Jacksonville, I guess Jacksonville is just north of here. We were talking about Mac Jones, Jacksonville native, and the Breakers, iconic resort that's actually burned down twice. They've rebuilt it into this beautiful, beautiful construction. It's the host of the NFL owners meetings every 3 years. Shanahan said that what really impressed him about Mac Jones when they considered picking him back in 2021, obviously they went with Trey Lance instead, but what impressed him about Mac Jones coming out of Alabama was his ability to play the position. Same kind of compliment that they had for Brock Purdy. The difference between Jones and Purdy is that Purdy can raise the ceiling of an offense with his mobility in a way that Jones obviously can't, but Jones could be a good QB2 for the 49ers. QB1 obviously being Brock Purdy, whom the 49ers seem very confident that they'll be able to reach a contract agreement with. Matt Barrows, our friend Matt Barrows, asked Kyle Shanahan today why the 49ers didn't sign Dre Greenlaw before he hit free agency. Obviously, he's with the Broncos now. And Kyle Shanahan said, we tried to. And I think that illustrates an important point, and it's one that Jed York got into as well today. You can't force anybody to sign a contract. It's not like this unilateral thing that a team does. And I get it that a lot of people play Madden and you put on franchise mode and you click a button and a player sign. In real life, it doesn't work that way. In real life, the team signs on the dotted line because they agree with the contract terms they put out there. And then you have to wait for the player to also sign on the dotted line. And the contract doesn't come into effect until both sides sign. And obviously, in the case of Dre Greenlaw, both sides didn't sign. I have a hunch why. Because Dre Greenlaw didn't want to be here. Well, maybe he wanted to be here, but this is a nice spot. But he didn't want to be in Santa Clara. He wanted to be the number one guy. He wanted to run his own shop with the number one defense in Denver. 49ers obviously slid defensively. One thing that I asked both Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch is, how are you going to fix this run defense? Because that obviously was a huge problem without Dre Greenlaw. And Shanahan and Lynch both indicated that Robert Salah, who's returned as the defensive coordinator, is going to really help the 49ers in that regard. Shanahan said that, when you have as many injuries as the 49ers did last year, you start relying a lot more on scheme and on experienced coordinating, which the 49ers didn't have. And if you're relying on that and it's, not there, it could get ugly. And it did for the 49ers as they slipped all the way down to number 29 in run defense. And then one thing I told Kyle in response is, I remember 2017, 2018. 49ers had not great personnel those 2 seasons on defense, but even though the overall rankings were still bad, they were decent against the run in both of those years. And that leads me to believe that Robert Salah is indeed somebody who can scheme up at least help for the run defense to make it better than last year, which could be a step forward for the 49ers. One thing I asked Kyle today, DeMarcus Robinson, the new receiver. By the way, today's April 1st. No Brandon Ayuk move. There's not going to be a Brandon Ayuk trade. The trigger date is today, so it has come and gone. DeMarcus Robinson is there to help the 49ers fill the gap while Ayuk is out at the start of the season, presumably. Robinson can play all 3 wide receiver spots. He can play the X, he could play the Z, he could play the F, and the X is crucial because that's where Brandon Ayuk plays. I think that you're going to see a rotation of Juwan Jennings and DeMarcus Robinson in that X wide receiver spot for the 49ers. Christian McCaffrey is a theme coming out of these owners' meetings. I talked for a while with Jed York yesterday. Jed York talked again today. Then we got this from both Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. If McCaffrey is healthy, and I think that there is a big-time confidence from the 49ers that he is locked in, and I can tell you from my own perspective, I talked to Christian, and he seems locked in for this year. I've covered him since 2014 at Stanford. He is a pivot point for this team. He's one of the best players to ever do it at that running back position, right? If he is available, ready to go, and he's fully healthy right now, he's working out hard, the 49ers, I think, can have a very good year. And that is a message that I got from a lot of the 49ers leadership here at the owners' meetings this week. Seems to me that Spencer Burford is now a tackle, not a guard, although Kyle Shanahan said he could play everywhere. I'm getting the sense that his move to swing tackle last year might become permanent. Shanahan today said that he's been happy with the play of Jake Brendel and Colton McKivitz, and it doesn't seem like Matt Hennessy is going to be in much of a competition with Jake Brendel at center. So, I mean, this is one that fans are going to disagree with, and John Lynch says that he doesn't follow the social media narrative. I will say, though, that the key words from John Lynch on this matter, and, Kyle Shanahan has indicated the same, is that the 49ers are looking to upgrade this offensive line through the draft no matter who they say that they like. And if Armand Membu, if Will Campbell, maybe even Kelvin Banks, if one of those guys, the tackles, is there at pick number 11, I would expect the 49ers to take a big swing for offensive line improvement. I think they could also find guys that could help the interior later. It doesn't benefit them at this point to trash their existing offensive linemen in the media. You have to see what you get in the draft and then determine how guys are going to compete. You can improve any position on a football team, right? Teams are big. There's always going to be a weak link or a weaker link. We just have to see where the 49ers are able to allocate their draft resources. It is a crapshoot in the NFL draft, and we will see how the 49ers proceed. But it is worth noting what Shanahan said about Jake Brendel. And it's worth noting, and it's not worth freaking out about. Shanahan said, I hope not on a Brock Purdy holdout. I think all my viewers just want a contract done, so I think they would agree with Kyle Shanahan there. And then a big piece of news today, the 49ers will bring in kicking competition for Jake Moody. Remember at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, which doesn't look like this? We're not going to mistake this from Indianapolis. I remember when we showed up to Tahiti and I said, hey, look, we made it early to the NFL Combine in Indy. Obviously, that was a joke, but way back in a much colder environment, a colder, grayer environment, I asked John Lynch about bringing in competition for Jake Moody, and he said, I think that's something we're really going to have to consider. Today at breakfast, Kyle Shanahan verified that the 49ers will bring in competition for Jake Moody. They are scouting college kickers, but they're leaning towards signing a veteran. And that would happen after the draft to compete with Jake over this offseason and the preseason to try to get the best out of Jake and maybe unseat him if Jake Moody struggles following the high ankle sprain continued. A name, Nick Folk. He's 40 years old, but he's only missed 2 kicks over the past 2 seasons. So his 2 best seasons kicking in his entire career have come at age 38 and 39, and now this is going to be age 40. So if you want to bring in a solid veteran who's going to bring stiff competition to Jake Moody, who might even beat him out, Nick Folk, if he agrees to sign on the dotted line, since it takes that, might be that guy for the 49ers. Finally, run game coordinator, new position for San Francisco, Brian Fleury, their tight ends coach. Talked about how bad the run game was last year. Chris Furster is not the run game coordinator anymore. That's the O-line coach. He now has an assistant head coach title. The tight ends coach, Brian Fleury, former college quarterback who's done a lot for the 49ers behind the scenes schematically, is going to be coordinating that run game. It's the same position that Mike McDaniel once had. McDaniel, now the head coach of the Dolphins, we got to see him this weekend. It was really cool at the party. There was a time there at the end of the party where you had Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan, D'Amico Ryans, and Richard Hightower, who's here for some of the special team stuff, some of the rules changes and the rules meetings. All of those guys, former 49ers coaches and the current head coach, Kyle Shanahan, in one spot. So this is a coaching staff that's seen a big-time brain drain. One of the big replacements for McDaniel in terms of crafting the run game has been Brian Fleury. And Brian Fleury is now the official run game coordinator for the 49ers. Last thing, Kyle Shanahan said this: I think there's going to be more competition than ever at training camp this year for starting spots for the 49ers, which is funny to hear because the roster, obviously, right now, it's going to be younger, might not be quite as strong for San Francisco, but we'll see what they do in the NFL draft as they renovate it. And the one thing that I think breeds winning is competition. Kyle Shanahan thinks there'll be more of that than ever. All right, guys, it's going to be time to get going. Why don't we take a look out at the yachts in the water? I see 2 right now, right? You see one over there, you see one off in the distance, you see several fishing boats, people enjoying their life on the water in South Florida. Time for us to hop on a plane and get out of here, although I think that Lombardi herself probably wants to stay a little bit longer.